Associate Professor of Comparative Media Studies and Writing at MIT. Great to have you all with us today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks
So
for having us.
I want to start with just the notion of how dominant AI is right now in the headlines in general, right? So in our business, in the news business, it's kind of like you can't sneeze and not run into 15 headlines about AI. But this is the news business, right? And the word new is right there in it. AI is new, and so it makes sense it's dominating the headlines. But I wonder in the issue with the issue of schools right now. I mean, it's not like the issues that have been facing schools, from funding to teacher pay to teacher shortages, mental health of students, absenteeism, et cetera. They haven't gone away. AI is now layered over it. I want to get a sense generally of where is AI on the sort of list of priorities or challenges facing schools right now? Or another way to say it is, how much oxygen in the room is it taking up when we're looking at the school year, and what is facing teachers, administrators, students? Maybe I'll start with you, Matt.
Well, it's sucking a tremendous amount of oxygen out of the room, among other resources, as we know with the data centers. So it's not just the schools, it's the environment. And there's threefold of a problem here. There's the first issue that teachers are dealing with every day, which is students resisting doing hard work and using AI as a supplement or a complete replacement for doing that. And that has existed since the advent of like Cliff Notes and everything. But the more intense issues are what is it doing to students' cognitive abilities? How is it harming them in terms of creating a sense of anxiety, dysregulation? And then thirdly, the data mining. Who is gaining from this? Are the students gaining, or is big tech gaining? And is it a technology that is being forced into the schools as excess because big tech has so heavily invested in it and have not found a consumer product worth selling?
When you say forced into the schools, forced by whom?
Forced by big tech and management. In the case that we're going to talk about in Springfield, the Empowerment Zone and Alpha School made an agreement, a deal, without even consulting the education workers or the union that represents them.
Gotcha. Shaleen, your perspective, go ahead.
Well, I agree that this is being forced on schools in some ways, and the environment where there are unprecedented financial challenges and all types of different challenges is actually, I think, making it easier for AI to kind of sneak in. So, for example, students often use Chromebooks. That started during COVID when they had to attend school remotely. The Chromebooks are still around, but because they're Google products, Google is able to turn on AI features and chatbots. And so in many cases, unless an administrator is going in and disabling those features, so it can be an intentional decision, Google is actually making the decision for how schools use AI and whether students use it rather than the communities and schools themselves.
Justin Reich, from your perspective, how much thinking is going into this when it comes to AI and schools, specifically K through 12 right now?
So starting pretty soon after ChatGPT was released, my team at the MIT Teaching Systems Lab interviewed 120 teachers and students across the country. We eventually released a podcast called The Homework Machine, trying to tell many of those stories. One of the patterns that we found was, particularly in affluent schools where you were pretty sure that like all the kids were going to pass their state tests, this was like absolutely the most urgent problem in schools. And those neighborhoods tend to have pretty substantial resources to kind of deal with these problems. If you go to places that are like Massachusetts gateway communities, lots of low-income students, then there's just a larger list of issues: homelessness, poverty, chronic absenteeism, other kinds of challenges, and so oftentimes teachers in those schools would tell us like, well, like AI is an issue, but it's like the 19th issue on our list. I would love to spend a day getting AI professional development, but there are no substitute teachers. There's literally no way for us to hire a substitute teacher this year. So I'm not going to be getting any training on AI. So I liked your initial framing that the challenges that many schools face are just as substantial as they were before ChatGPT was released.
Gotcha. Well, let's turn to some headlines. This one not too new, but I think big enough a headline that we ought to talk about it. And this is, I think it's back in January. big sweeping report came out from the Brookings Institution Center for Universal Education. They did focus groups, interviews with K through 12 students, parents, educators, tech experts across, I think it was 50 countries. You know, I'm going to oversimplify what they found, but basically the conclusion of this study is essentially that the risks of using generative AI to educate children and teens currently overshadows the benefits. That's sort of the in total sort of broad sweeping sort of determination of this study. I'm gonna guess you've at least glanced at this study, all of you. What's your take on it? We'll start with you, Shaleen.
Well, first, I just want to mention I live in a gateway community. I live in Malden. And I think that our district has taken a great approach, which is that they have turned off AI chatbots for now and created a working group of parents and teachers to make recommendations for when an AI product is safe and improves learning outcomes and is equitable.
Who's on the group?
So parents and teachers are on the group, and they're advising the school committee. And the reason that approach makes sense is exactly because of what this study shows. Because the risks to cognitive development, social and economic development are so high, and the stakes are really high. Like some of the outcomes that the study mentioned, there are risks of students not being able to form relationships, to recover from setbacks, to maintain their mental health. And so a district, I think, needs to be really intentional if they decide that it's so important to use an AI product that it outweighs all of those risks. And so I love what Malden is doing. They're not just letting the chatbots kind of creep in, but they're creating a policy that is proactive and opts out of those products by default.
Matt, we said in when I was introducing you all that, you are the head of the Massachusetts Teachers Union now recently, but you were a classroom teacher for 25 years. One of the things this study found is that AI, the damages it has already caused, it says, are daunting, but fixable. You've been in the classroom. Does that track with what you've seen?
Absolutely. In the last year, I've seen social relations diminish between students and faculty, but the cognitive effects, the anxiety, the dysregulation, as I said before, I would encourage people to also look at some of the work of Jared Cooney Horvath, who is a neuroscientist and has testified before Congress about the cognitive elasticity of students over the 20th century and how more public education has made students better than their parents, except for the last 30 or so years with the introduction of one-to-one devices and screen time in classrooms. Another thing that was mentioned about the gateway cities, there are a lot of issues, social issues, economic issues that we have to address. But that's why big tech is sort of predatory in going there. That's why Alpha School is going to Springfield, because they feel like they can take advantage of the disadvantaged.
This is the Curiosity Desk. We're talking about AI in K through 12 schools with MTA President Matt Bach, emerging industries lawyer Shaleen Title, and MIT Professor Justin Reich. We've mentioned Alpha Schools a couple times. We're going to get there. If folks don't know about Alpha School, we will get there. But let's talk a little bit, Justin. We're talking about sort of the potential damage cognitively here, and Education Department has kind of released some guidelines that in the last couple of weeks they've been coming out, and essentially, there have been a number of things, but the basically the statement we're hearing is like, let's not judge instructional technologies on whether or not they're happening on a screen. Let's judge them about their impact on learning. I mean, this is basically the every tool is a weapon if you hold it right argument, that there is some good potentially with these technologies. There's some bad potentially with these technologies, and it ought to be up to individual schools or individual districts to work out how to use them. And really the baseline measure here should be, is it working to help students get educated or is it not? What's your feelings about what you're seeing coming out of the Department of Education right now, Justin?
Well, there's certainly wisdom in saying that what every school ought to be doing is thinking about, okay, what could we do this year? What could we do in the next couple of years to make our learning environments better and more effective for our students? And when schools try new things, we should evaluate them. I think what that Dear Colleague letter misses is that a technology infrastructure is not like a single thing that you do. It's not like one technique or one book or something like that. If you want to have a technology infrastructure, you've got to like buy all these devices and hire people to manage them and buy different kinds of software. Like it's kind of a big investment. And one of the challenges I think we're particularly seeing in K-6 is that the benefits of these infrastructures are often not being realized, and there are very serious problems that families and teachers are experiencing. So parents are looking at the apps that are coming home on their kids' Chromebooks, and they're like, this instruction is lousy. And then they're finding out that kids are spending inordinate time, watching YouTube or playing cool math games in class, which are not like actually games about math. And they're saying we're not seeing the value of this stuff. We're trying to control the amount of time that our kids are spending on screens outside of school. It's not helping if they're doing a bunch of it in school. Why not just get rid of the whole thing and work on something else? And the Department of Education is trying to say like, well, don't do that. Pick specific things where these can be helpful and stick with it. But I think it misses the idea that you can't pick one app and bring it into class. Like you can bring a pack of crayons, or a gym teacher can bring a bag of dodgeballs. It's not one thing. It's a sort of huge infrastructure. And I think schools what they should always be doing is revisiting these infrastructures and seeing whether or not they're serving. Actually, the town of Cambridge did a great thing recently where they asked their faculty and administrators to do like an audit of all of the screen time usage in the city. And they pretty quickly found some things that they thought were really bad, like kids using screens for indoor recess and stuff like that. And then they found some things that they were happier with. And now they have a little bit more data to engage in a conversation with their community.
Shaleen?
I want to agree with that. I'm one of those parents.
I saw you nodding, yeah.
I would also add, though, if I can be more plainly critical of the Department of Education. I mean, look, Melania Trump showed up earlier this year at an AI education summit with a humanoid robot. Like, I think that the Trump administration is not hiding it, that they want to see AI replacing teachers. And it's one of these many issues where there are federal efforts to cause harm, and at the local level we have to counter that and fight back. So I would encourage anybody, whether you're a parent or not, if you don't want to see AI replacing teachers, you should be getting in touch with your school committee. You should be raising this, and in particular asking for specific protective standards, because if we don't have protection, these chatbots are going to creep in under the radar and cause significant harm.
We need protection. I think we need to go one step further as a Commonwealth and have a moratorium on contracts between public education institutions and big tech on this issue so that we can better understand it and study it. I agree that technology has a variety of applications. The history of technology is the history of offloading hard work. That's what we do with technology. Yeah. And that's not always appropriate when we're talking about pedagogy and the science of learning.
The hard work is the point.
The hard work is the point. And, I used to have to use the periodical index to do research when I was in college. Don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
But is that something that created a critical thinking mechanism in my head of which sources to use, which sources not to use, discriminate between bad and good sources.
Yeah. One of the things, I think one of the challenges here, and, there are plenty of headlines you can find out there with people saying, like, one of the things we do have to do in our schools is we've got to, at the very least, we've got to teach these students about the fact that there is this thing AI, because they're entering a world where this is there. I think one of the problems is this technology is incredibly new. It's also developing incredibly fast. Therefore, I hear all of you talking about we need to have protection in place. We need to be careful as we go. But how do we figure out where to draw the lines? Like, I would agree that let me ask this. I'll start with this. Do you all agree that there is some role for AI in our classrooms, that it has to be addressed in some way, or is it something that we literally wall our schools off from the notion that AI is in the universe?
Well, of course, we need AI literacy as part of broader media literacy, no question. And that's very separate from using AI to replace
do the
what is
teaching.
what is currently educational. I do think tech companies are doing a pretty good job of conflating those two things and kind of using circular logic to tell schools, well, your students need to be AI literate, and the workforce.
Therefore, I have this
behind.
teacher for you.
Exactly.
Yeah. I gotcha. Justin, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was thinking about Matt's comment, and I think if you propose to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts a moratorium on engagement with technology, that many parents would object to that, because one of the things that they see is that they feel like it's really important for their students to have learning opportunities with caring educators, like the teachers in Andover and Malden and other places, to be able to figure out, not just how to think about these tools, but how to use them in a variety of settings. I gave a talk recently to a group of Winchester and Arlington parents who were organized around the idea that they wanted to reduce the amount of technology in schools. My daughter is coming in as a junior in Arlington High School. And I said, well, I think there are places that we can set limits, but also if my daughter, graduates from Arlington High School and doesn't have some experience, where she and some teachers are sort of diving into trying to do something with these new tools, I think she might not be as well prepared as she could be if she had those experiences. But it's certainly the case that every school has to do something. I mean, an unusual thing about large language models, chatbots, is that historically most education technology is adopted. Communities of people get together and they decide, do we want to buy smart boards? Do we want to buy Chromebooks? Do we want iPads? ChatGPT just arrived. It appeared instantly on the phones, on the laptops, on the tablets of pretty much every, student and teacher who has one of these devices. And so even if you say, man, we want to keep these things out, that's not a business as usual decision. You have to do like a whole bunch of engineering to your school policy, to how your classrooms operate, to your curriculum and things like that, to make it so that these things stay out.
Matt, is there a role for this technology in the classroom?
I'm not sure. There are two industries that call their customers users, big tech and illegal narcotics. And I think that analogy is not without importance when you look at what's going on with Meta right now. The owners of Meta are being tried for basically the addictive qualities of this. And we know that they don't send their children to schools that are forcibly using one-to-one and AI products, where it seems like what we're headed for is a society where, at Phillips Academy, we'll have a teacher with 13 students doing the humane social activity of public education, or not public education in that case, of education. And then the disadvantaged students are going to get robots. And
You listen to the Curiosity Desk. This is our AI news panel focused on K through 12. We're talking with MTA President Matt Bach, emerging industries lawyer Shaleen Title, and MIT Professor Justin Reich. Let's talk about the Alpha School. We've mentioned it a couple of times. This is sort of I guess this is sort of the extreme end of what we're talking about, the fears we're talking about in terms of teacher replacement, if that's your position, which is to say the Alpha School is a national chain, private schools, artificial intelligence tools, essentially teaching the students. So each one has their own individual, I guess, chatbot that is their tutor. There are no teachers. There are, quote, guides, I believe is what they call them at the Alpha School. Here in Massachusetts, you mentioned this, Matt. There's a school, Kiley Prep, out in Springfield that wants to use this model developed by Alpha School. And there is an Alpha School that is going to open this fall in Boston, 25 students, private school, $55,000 a year to do it. I think I know where you're going to stand on this, Matt, but what's your take on the Alpha School?
Well, I think it's very concerning. First of all, this is experimenting on students and looking to collect data to push their product. Some of the things that they're doing with the student data, they're going to take screenshots while students are working, monitor keyboard and mouse activity, determine if the student is idle, record students with webcams, microphones, put headband monitors on the students, record student biometric data. And all of this, there's supposed to be an opt-out, but if the student is in a situation where they're engaging with another student, there's no guarantee that data won't be collected. I'll just say 10 years ago, we actually in Andover read the user agreement between the district and the Google Suite that the district was buying. And it said in the fine print that Google would be considered a school administrator for the purposes of the federal confidentiality laws. So people are being forced into these agreements, school committees, administrators, and students without knowing what they say. And in what other venue do we allow children to sign contracts except with these types of data mining, private industries from social media right through alpha?
Shaleen, alpha schools?
Well, I'm particularly concerned about public schools that have pilot AI programs. You asked before, how do we set these standards? AI is novel in a lot of ways, but also this is not the first time that we've had an emerging technology that has benefits, potential benefits, but also has risks. We have experimental drug programs. We have learning accommodations already. We have ways that we can slowly introduce products once they meet certain standards without, pushing them on students. In some ways, AI is kind of like cars before seatbelts or medication before we had ingredient lists. And it's just not fair to push an experimental product with unknown risks onto students, particularly in public schools where they haven't consented or their parents haven't consented. And I do want to make sure everyone knows that parents do have federal rights to object to the use of their students' data under the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. And they should know that they have those rights and they shouldn't let Google usurp them.
Justin, anything about the alpha school experiment, so to speak, that strikes you as maybe okay?
Yeah, I mean, I've been pretty critical. If there are some things that I think are interesting about it. One thing that they've said is something along the lines of, we have to get our kids prepared for these tests, but it's not like what we want to spend all day doing. So what if we used machines to
do the test prep?
And then we'll teach them what we want to teach them. And then we'll spend the rest of the day, doing other kinds of stuff. I think one problem with that in the public school context is that, like, collectively, like as citizens who elect people to, make curriculum and things like that, like the amount of stuff that we're asking our schools to do, like, pretty much takes all day. So the only way that the sort of 2-hour model of alpha really works is if they don't teach a bunch of subjects. Like, they don't really seem to teach history and social studies. They don't teach a lot of biology. I mean, to me, it doesn't bother me that, like if a bunch of people who want to pay $65,000 a year to have their kids do 2 hours of online test prep and then do weird projects and field trips in the afternoon, I mean, we have a system of private schools that allow people to make those individual choices. But I do think, there are parts of the alpha school model which seem to me to be not coherent with the expectations that we have of public schools, particularly to sort of teach higher curriculum that we've agreed, as neighbors and citizens is important.
We're nearly out of time. Before I let you all go, I just kind of want to get your take on another story in the headlines. This is a couple of weeks ago, late July, 98 teens representing 50 states all got together and basically in a model U.S. Senate chamber and kind of attempted to go through the exercise of saying, like, hey, let's pass legislation, that is a guideline for how we ought to use AI in schools. I mean, basically just like the Senate, but it was, high school students representing their states kind of hashing it out. And they came up with some recommendations, put them out there in the world. What do you make of this, Matt?
Well, I think that students have a lot of common sense. I've worked with students for the last 25 years, and they know when something's up and something's wrong and when it's time to tap the brakes. And just because people use the term innovation and AI literacy doesn't mean that's what's happening. And it's time to take note of that type of activism and lean into the humanities education that was just mentioned so that students are equipped with the ethical, philosophical, and moral understanding that's going to be required as this AI system develops.
How about for you, Shaleen? Should students a part of the Voices for Solutions here as we try to figure out how to move forward with schools and AI?
Yes, absolutely. But I hate to be a wet blanket because some aspects of that event were so cool. But it was put on by MIT Raise, which is part of MIT Media Lab, which is funded by a long list of technology companies, including Google. And I think people are not interested in technology companies setting the parameters for the discussion. So what I would love to see instead is communities creating their own policies and making sure that students are a part of that.
Community-based policies. Justin, any thoughts on this one before we go?
There's a long history of students being involved in Massachusetts schools. The Burlington High School had a fabulous model of a student tech team that was very involved in some of the very earliest one-to-one pilots that were there, that started actually as students just doing sort of tech help, but eventually they got very involved in helping co-plan lessons with teachers, providing support, things like that. So for all these questions, I mean, I'm getting ready to teach this fall, and my AI policy on my syllabus is pretty much, we're going to talk about it. We'll have the students show up, we'll see what they want to do, and we'll talk together and figure out what makes sense and what works.
That's not bad. At the very least, let's talk about it. That's what we've been doing, speaking with MTA President Matt Bach, Justin Reich, an Associate Professor of Comparative Media Studies and Writing at MIT, and Shaleen Title, Adjunct Professor of Law at Roger Williams University, where she teaches AI regulations. Thank you all for being with us, sharing your time and expertise today.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
When we return, has your social media feed been flooded over the last few weeks with updates from the Lindsay Clancy trial? Well, we're going to talk with an expert on why true crime is so captivating and what following these types of cases so closely does to our brains. Yikes. It's the Curiosity Desk. Don't go anywhere.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, Chef Ana Sortun. She has spent decades making the flavors of the Eastern Mediterranean feel at home in Greater Boston. A James Beard Award winner, Sortun joins us to talk about how travel shaped her food philosophy and why Mediterranean cooking nurtures the soul. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Berkeley, presenting its inaugural homecoming block party outside Fenway, featuring Susan Tedeschi, Tiwa Savage, and more. September 19th from 1 to 6. Tickets at berkeley.edu/homecoming. And the David M. Rubenstein Americana Collection in support of the JFK Library's exhibit Declaring the Revolution, America's Printed Path to Independence, featuring historic documents that inspired the Declaration of Independence. jfklibrary.org.
You listen to the Curiosity Desk on GBH 89.7. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. We are streaming live on the YouTube. You can check us out at youtube.com/GBH News. Well, with me right now in the studio is Curiosity Desk producer extraordinaire Rachel Armani. Hey, Rachel.
Hi.
So Rachel, we got a question for you here.
Okay.
How thankful are you for Momofuku Ando?
Well, considering I do not know who that is,
I am shocked. I'm shocked.
I don't have a lot of feelings about them yet.
Yet. All right. Well, I'm going to posit actually that this man had an impact, possibly a big one, on you, at least at some point in your life.
Okay, I'm curious. Please tell me how Momofuku Ando.
It's Momofuku Ando.
Ando. Okay. Yes.
I think. Anyway, you once went to college. Yeah, and you were once a recent college grad.
Yep.
Okay.
Shout out to my alma mater, George Washington University.
Nice.
Did go
All right,
there.
so take yourself back to those days.
Okay.
Tell me about what what were you eating? What was your diet like? What were some of your go-tos, your staples at that time period?
Well, my diet was pretty terrible. Wake up, start the day with a couple Takis and a vitamin water.
Takis?
Yep, probably half a bag.
Wait, was that
a lot of pizza.
Little side quest here.
Yep.
Was the vitamin water like you telling yourself, well, I got to have something healthy with these Takis?
I love that.
So
No, it
I'm going to
wasn't.
have some
I literally was just like,
vitamin water.
yummy sugar. Yeah, there's not even real vitamins in it. Shout out to the segment yesterday about nutrition. Yeah, Takis. I ate a lot of Lunchables. It's also pretty gross.
Yeah.
Lots of ramen.
There it is. There it is. Lots of ramen.
Yep.
Yeah. This is what I'm talking about.
So this man, I'm guessing maybe he had something to do with ramen.
Not just something, Rachel. He is, in fact, the father of instant noodles.
Wow.
The man who is credited with inventing and introducing instant ramen to the world.
That's crazy. I feel like I have to shake his hand.
Yeah,
He got me through some dark times.
As the story goes, and I have learned over the years doing the curiosity test to be very careful with invention stories because inventing something is complicated. So there's obviously other people along the way who kind of had versions of this or whatever. But the story for him is, as it goes, he worked alone, sleeping only 4 hours a night without a day off for over a year in a little shed behind his home in a small town in Osaka, Japan, and eventually perfected this product, which was an instant ramen that you could make at home by just adding hot water, right? He made the curly noodles, he steamed them, seasoned them, flash fried them for that quick dehydration, pretty much like you see him today.
Wow, that's really cool.
And it was on this day, August 25th, back in 1958, that Nissan Foods, his company, introduced chicken ramen to the market, instant noodles, an instant success.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Momofuku Ando.
Also,
awesome.
Nissan Foods instant ramen still available today. So cup noodles, that's them, and Top Ramen, that's the Nissan Foods ramen.
Wow, that is a positively delicious fact from this day in history. Yep, love that one. But me, I'm hungry for something else. A little news from this day in history in 2026. And when I have that kind of hankering, there's only one thing that satisfies. Tziperman Lotan. Oh, that's the long one.
It's the double.
Geall writes the GBH Daily newsletter. Hello, Geall.
Hello, my bowl overfloweth with news today. So let's get started. Okay,
I'm hungry.
So we're in the depths of August.
We are.
So we're going to start with a story about camp.
Hey, all right.
Yeah. I love a summer camp.
Murder in the woods.
No, not like that.
It's just like horror movies. All right, go ahead. What's the real news?
We're talking about the Camp Menotomy property on Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire. It was a Girl Scout camp for kids from Arlington, but it shut down in the early pandemic days of 2020.
Arlington, the original name for Arlington, Menotomy.
Oh, interesting. That's where it came from.
Menotomy, yeah.
That's great. Learning something new. So now its owners want to sell it to someone who will use the land to build housing. But a former camper and this man who operates another camp in New Hampshire are taking them to court, saying that the trust that gave the land to the Girl Scouts says that the owners have to offer up the land to someone else who wants to run a camp there before they take it to the wider market.
So is there camp happening this year as the battle's going on?
No, there hasn't been camp there since 2020.
Oh, I got it. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, shut down since I gotcha. So where do things stand? What's happening?
They went to court yesterday and made their arguments. The judge has not yet issued a decision.
So we're talking about like selling this camp. How much money are we talking about?
Yeah, so potentially a lot of money. The people who want to run a camp there have offered $1.5 million, and the housing developers are offering $18 million.
So a little bit different.
Yeah,
slight difference.
Quite the change, quite the difference in the amounts there.
Yeah.
Well, keep us posted. That's an interesting
absolutely.
story.
Well, our newsroom will keep following that story.
Definitely. So what else is going on today?
Yeah. So the primary elections are 1 week from today, and early voting is already happening. So I hope everyone is getting ready, filling out their mail-in ballots, going to their city or town halls. Exactly.
Civic duty.
Yes. And also we're almost 2 months away from the midterms on November 3rd. So yesterday, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a ruling about a lawsuit a bunch of states, including Massachusetts, brought over a Trump administration executive order that would try to limit how people can vote by mail. Basically, the conservative justices said that they don't think the states had legal standing to bring this case right now, so they effectively dismissed this case. Yeah,
but reading headlines that I saw around this seems sort of like they're like, this is the ruling for now. So what does this mean, at least at this point, for November?
Exactly. So Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Joy Campbell said that you'll still be able to vote by mail. She said the Constitution gives the states power to administer elections, and she said her office will keep pursuing this issue. So we will see and keep people updated on how this shakes out.
Right. All right. What else you got?
So let's go over to the Boston Symphony Orchestra. Ooh. The union contract between the orchestra and its musicians is expiring tonight, and that's after a 48-hour extension that started on Sunday. And the musicians have voted to authorize a strike.
Yeah. I've been following the story. So they're voting to authorize a strike, but does that
Yes.
mean that they actually will go on strike, or is it just to approve that it could happen?
Exactly. So they won't necessarily go on strike. It just gives the union's leadership the option to call for one if negotiations aren't working.
Oh, okay.
But right now, they're still talking, so we
Classic
will see what happens.
negotiations. Yeah, we'll keep following that story for sure. You got one more for us, Gaul?
Yes. So, Edgar,
Yes.
I know you've swam in the Charles River before.
I have.
What was that like?
It was kind of exactly like you would expect it to be. No, I mean it is cool. Listen, I love rivers. It is kind of the thing I love about rivers is they, like most major cities have rivers going through them, and there's something about being in a river inside of a city setting that I find like really amazing. And so actually like swimming in the Charles, kind of amazing. My tip is if you do swim in the Charles, first of all, do it when you can, when you're supposed to. And second of all, don't touch the bottom.
Stay above ground.
Wear some shoes and don't touch the
Okay,
bottom.
so you mentioned some of those dangerous things happening at the bottom of the river.
Yeah.
Right now, there's also a little bit of danger going on near the top. So the Boston Public Health Commission wants people to know that they definitely should not be touching the water. They've found potentially dangerous levels of cyanobacteria, also known as blue-green algae. So if you or your pets come into contact with this bacteria, it can cause some serious gastrointestinal issues and other health problems. So keep your pets away from it. Don't come in contact with the water downstream from the Massachusetts Avenue Bridge, even if you love that dirty water.
Though also remember, one of my favorite things about cyanobacteria, I mean, obviously, as you point out, legitimate danger when the water has a lot of cyanobacteria. But cyanobacteria was like the first thing that photosynthesized light, which is what finally released all of the oxygen into the air that allowed us to have an oxygen-rich planet. So also, thank you, cyanobacteria.
What a gratitude perspective from you, Edgar.
Life-creating.
Be
And
grateful.
I will not be swimming in the Charles.
Yes, that's
I'm
very
not trying to
wise,
glow in the
Rachel.
dark today.
Yes, exactly.
But thank you so much. That is Gaul Tziperman Lotan from our email newsletter, GBH Daily. You can subscribe for free at gbh.org/daily.
Gaul, Rachel, thank you both.
Thank you.
Yay.
Coming up next, why can we not look away from true crime cases like Lindsay Clancy or Karen Reed? One social media researcher breaks down why we love being amateur detectives online and what the constant cycle is doing to our psyche. This is the Curiosity Desk. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. Don't go anywhere.
There are 26 gateway cities in Massachusetts.
And in 2026, we're going to get to know them all. But we need your help. We want to cover what matters to you,
We want to hear what concerns you have.
what you're proud of, and what you want people to know about your community.
So if you're in a gateway city,
We want to hear from you.
Reach out to us at gbhnews.org/gateway cities.
26 in 26. That's gbhnews.org/gateway cities.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, providing helpful digital tools, world-class providers, and coverage that help you live in the moment. More at massgeneralbrighamhealthplan.org. And Boston Medical Center, regionally ranked 4th for cancer care in Massachusetts by U.S. News and World Report, dedicated to meeting patients where they're needed most for over 30 years.
You are listening to the Curiosity Desk on GBH 89.7. I'm Edgar B. Herwick III. We are streaming live at youtube.com/GBH News if you want to join us there. Well, it seems like every time a high-profile trial hits the headline, social media turns into a courtroom of its own. Amateur detectives, hot takes, entire communities coming together to talk about the case. Around here, we saw it happen with Karen Reed, and we're seeing it play out right now with the case of Lindsay Clancy, Duxbury mother, currently on trial for the murder of the strangling deaths of her 3 young children in 2023. So what is going on with this? Why do these cases pull on us so hard, and how is it impacting our mental health? To talk about that and more, we are joined now over Zoom by Kathryn Coduto. She's an assistant professor of media science at Boston University who conducted a study last year on adults and their social media use and online engagement with crime stories. Kathryn, welcome to the Curiosity Desk. I'm excited to talk about this.
Thanks for having me. I'm also very excited to jump in.
So we love studies here on the Curiosity Desk, and I love to talk about study design and sort of how you went about it. So tell us about this study. Where did you get the idea for it, and what did you do? How did you study this phenomenon? What was the phenomenon, and how did you study it?
So I've been interested in social media broadly for a long time now. And as I've looked at it, I've noticed, alongside it, the rise of interest in true crime. And so I feel like it took my already existing interest in social media, and then I was able to look at this true crime element specifically, because I think that it's been really interesting to watch people get hooked on specific crimes, on how they follow them, because that is something that people, of course, do. And so I love that we're talking study design, because it was something, I thought a lot about was, how do I actually capture what people are doing when they're thinking about true crime?
Totally.
And so I did a survey where I actually asked people, not just, are you a true crime fan generally, but what are you following right now? What are the cases that have your attention, and why are you focused on those cases? And I liked those questions because I think it gets a little more in depth into what's actually going on with someone as they're following a story, rather than saying, oh, what were you interested in even a couple weeks ago? And so I think that was a real strength of that design, was getting people to say, this is what I'm following right now, and here is why.
And what did you find out? I mean, were there patterns? Did people sort themselves into buckets? Like what did you learn?
All kinds of things.
Yeah.
So as you can imagine. So one of the things that really stood out to me was, of course, I figured that people would be really invested in the stories that they were following, and they were. So one of the things I noticed was that people, once they had found a specific story to really sink their teeth into, they kept returning back to it. So they experienced what I call cognitive preoccupation. So even if they weren't reading about it in the moment, they were still thinking about it. They wanted an update. They wanted to know what was going to happen next. The other thing I thought was really interesting was the fact that people developed parasocial relationships with characters in these stories, and that was not limited to victims. So in a lot of previous research, we see focus on people, empathizing with victims, wanting to really understand the victims. But in my study, people also felt at least some sort of understanding, if not a relationship, with the perpetrators as well. And I think that is reflective. Right. I think that's really reflective of the social media environment, and the fact that these are real people, and people in my study would go to, whether it was the victim or the perpetrator, to their social media accounts. So they felt like they were getting to know them. They felt like they were investing in them, again, like characters in a story.
Well, I mean, you say characters in a story, but I wonder, I mean, obviously, as you say, you sort of posit the social media environment inherently somehow sort of maybe kind of allows people to sort of explore this potential relationship or with the perpetrator as well. But I also wonder about a more traditional media environment. In the last decade, we have seen the rise of the anti-hero. We see a lot of true crime stories in the fictional space where the main character is the perpetrator, and or the perpetrator is presented at least in complicated and not totally negative light. I mean, do you think that's having an impact on how we're now processing actual real life stuff?
I mean, absolutely. And I think it's a great question and a great point to bring up, because I think for me, social media makes it easier. When I look at how people were responding, it's that ease of, I can jump to someone's account and look at what they were doing. So in my study, one of the big cases that people followed was the Gabby Petito case, who was murdered by her boyfriend when they were doing the van life thing. But I think you bring up a great point. When you look at how we talk about serial killers, when we look at the dramatizations of serial killers, the way people like Ted Bundy are treated in mass media, I think you're right that there's already kind of an existing frame for how we talk about them and the nuances that we allow them. And now I think that we're taking that even further with the ability to really see what that person has posted or what their activity is like. So I think you're spot on with that point.
You're listening to The Curiosity Desk. We're talking with BU Associate Professor Kathryn Coduto about society's obsession with true crime stories, like the case of Lindsay Clancy. One phrase that you mentioned in your research is forensic fandom. What is that, and how is it showing up online? It's a great phrase.
Isn't it a great phrase?
Yeah.
I did not originally coin it, but I've been studying it for a while now. And so forensic fandom basically refers to the sense that when you are watching something or invested in something in the media, and that could be a real life story like Lindsay Clancy. It could also be a fictional story, but it means that you as a viewer feel like you are seeing clues that maybe other people aren't. You are going to put together the facts in a way that other people have missed. And if you look, the term actually originated in fictional spaces. So forensic fandom really stems from people who are, invested in Lost, the TV show, because they thought like they were going to figure it out before other people did. And now we see that in true crime cases, especially because if you look, a lot of existing documentaries, podcasts, all of these things, there's always a moment, there's a reveal where, the police missed something or, law enforcement missed something. There was some critical clue that didn't come out until later. And so online sleuths feel like I could be the person to find that.
Yeah,
I'm
you
going
become
to
a
be the one to
character
fill
in
it
the
in.
story.
Exactly.
Like,
Exactly. So you're not just like kind of a passive viewer, but now you're an active participant. You're going to be part of the solution. You're going to help someone get justice.
Yeah. So obviously the case right now that that is sort of the highest profile in these style cases, this Lindsay Clancy trial. I mean, have you seen the observations that you've seen in your study playing out online in this particular case? And if so, what ones? Or is this one different in some ways?
I think there are quite a few overlaps with, what I saw in my study and the cases that people were following in this one. And I do think there are some differences. So I think, one of the things that in my own research, but other research that, regularly comes out is that women tend to follow true crime more often. And so women tend to be the ones who are following these stories because they're often trying to learn about things like self-protection. Whereas this story is a little different because we have a perpetrator who is a woman, and instead of being scared of her, there's a lot more compassion and empathy. And I think that's because there's this different angle with, Lindsay Clancy talking about her postpartum depression and psychosis, and women saying, oh, I understand what that's like. Again, maybe not to the extreme that it's taken to here, but those are experiences I have had. And so I think that creates an interesting nuance in this case that you don't often see. And I do think ultimately you're still seeing people who are developing that parasocial relationship with her, but also with her defense attorney and even with her husband, people who are finding those characters, identifying with them, really investing in them.
What do you make of the idea of the 24-hour news cycle? And in a case like this, even just also, I mean, obviously social media is a 24-hour thing as well, and the fact that this is a trial that's playing out on television. There is live blogging happening on legitimate news sites, and then also there's thread after thread on Reddit, and there's social media kind of people who are covering this live, minute by minute, bite by bite. I mean, has this environment supercharged this phenomenon in some way? And is that a bad thing?
I mean, I do think it's absolutely supercharged. I think that's a great way to put it. And I think you're right. When we look at 24-hour news overall, that encourages lots of engagement with the smallest of details about the smallest.
You got to feed the beast. You got to
have
something
right,
to talk
exactly,
about.
right. Like you have to fill time. And then when you look at social media too, right, that's another way where you have to spend all this time. And the social media companies want you to stay on. And so the more content that people make about a case like this, the more they're going to consume. But there's absolutely an incentive then for a lower quality of information, for information that's just simply not real or factual. And so, yeah, I think to your ultimate point, this is not necessarily a great thing. And that's part of what I've been so interested in studying this area more broadly is a lot of people get hooked on social media. They stay on social media for so long, right? We've heard the term doom scrolling or bed rotting, right? And those are things that happen when people just can't look away from social media, whether it's on their phone screen or their laptop, their tablet, whatever the case may be. And ultimately, right, it's really good to be able to take a step away from these things. And I think, too, in a case like this, where, again, lots of misinformation has been spread, really important to be able to take a step back and say, what's the quality of this source? Is this TikTok video really the highest quality thing? Should I be trusting what this kind of random person online is saying?
How about, there's any number of studies out there, about social media broadly and its impacts on our mental health, particularly like, whereas you say we're doom scrolling or we're on it a lot or we're spending too much time with it. But if our engagement on social media is both too much time and around a true crime situation like you have studied. What do we know and not know about how that is impacting our mental health? Both in terms of how we're engaging with the world on social media, but also how we're engaging with the world IRL, like in real life.
Yeah. Great question. So in my own study, that was one of the things I was most interested in was, if you're experiencing these things, if you're thinking about these stories, what does that do to you? And in my study, people did report poor mental health because these are not uplifting stories, right? True crime is not something where you often have a happy, neat ending. And so a lot of people would say, I came away from this feeling worse. If I think about this too much, I have a worse day. And in some cases, people said, it interrupts my work life or my school life. And so that alone is not great. To your other point, though, there is this kind of open question about, well, how does this manifest in real life? If you look at older studies about, like you said earlier, the 24-hour news cycle and stories about crime on TV traditionally, there is some evidence to suggest that this leads to greater mistrust of people in real life. We don't know the extent of what social media and true crime, that combination is doing to people's experience in real life. If you're following these stories really closely, are you becoming more suspicious of people? Are you worried about going out in public? Things like that. We don't know the extent of that yet. And I think, for me, I'm always trying to think about, well, what's the next study?
I was going to say, I think I know somebody who might be able to design a study to get us a little more information on that. All right, we've been speaking with BU Associate Professor Kathryn Coduto. Kathryn, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that music means that about does it for us for now. Stay with us. Up next on The Culture Show, they'll talk with author of Flora Culture about what really goes into making a bouquet, from global trade to labor to culture and environmental costs. Sounds like another good one from Jared Bowen and The Culture Show. The Curiosity Desk is produced by Aidan Connolly, Rachel Armani, Olivia Corcio, and Hannah Loss. Our intern is Mukta Dharmaperkar. Patty Daniels and Jamie Bologna are our online and offline obsession. Our engineer, Bill Piacatelli, today. We will be right back here in 23 short hours on GBH 89.7 and streaming on YouTube. If you just can't wait that long, well, we've got a podcast version of the show. You can check that out anytime, wherever it is that you get your podcasts. All right, until next time, I am Edgar B. Herwick III, and I hope you will stay curious out there.
What's trending? What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Newbury Court, serving Concord, Massachusetts for 30 years as a not-for-profit continuing care retirement community dedicated to older adults. More at newburycourt.org. Miles O'Brien travels the globe searching for solutions to urgent climate, water, and health crises. Don't miss Resolve to Solve with Miles O'Brien, tomorrow at 10 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, Chef Ana Sortun has spent more than 2 decades making the flavors of Turkey and the Eastern Mediterranean part of Greater Boston's culinary vocabulary. At her restaurants Oleana, Sofra, and Sarma, she has built a career around spices, vegetables, and communal eating. The James Beard Award winner joins us to talk about the travels that changed her cooking and the food philosophy that followed. And a bouquet can carry more than beauty. In her new book, Flora Culture, writer, designer, and gardener Christin Geall follows flowers through a global industry in full bloom, tracing the trade, traditions, and environmental costs behind what we grow, give, and bring into our homes. That's all right now on The Culture Show.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
I'm Jared Bowen. This is The Culture Show, live on 89.7 and streaming on the GBH News YouTube channel. When the Phantom of the Opera lowered its chandelier for the last time on Broadway in 2023, it appeared a legend had met his last. But the Phantom has found a new way to haunt New York. He slipped back onto West 57th Street in a new guise. Masquerade, an immersive adaptation of Andrew Lloyd Webber's blockbuster musical, The Phantom of the Opera, that can only be accessed with a secret password, where you step off the Manhattan sidewalk and are quickly deposited in the lush confines of the Paris Opera House, champagne in hand. Instead of sitting in the dark, you don a mask, join a small crowd, and proceed through a 6-story maze of candlelit salons, steep catwalks, and tension-filled dressing chambers as the performance unfolds all around you. Joining us to talk about this wild new way into the iconic show is Tony Award-winning director Diane Paulus. You know her, of course, as the artistic director of the American Repertory Theater. She's the director of Masquerade and worked for 3 years with composer Andrew Lloyd Webber to craft it. Diane Paulus, welcome back to the show. Great to see you.
Great to be here.
Well, what place did the Phantom of the Opera have with you even before you began to think about adapting it?
I mean, it's an iconic musical. You can't be in the theater world and not know it, breathe it, have heard it. I had people audition for me using songs from the show. And I had also seen the film. So I knew of it very well and had experienced it. And then when it was announced to be closing, I went back and saw it again. And I'll tell you, the thing that I was so impressed by was how immersive the show was, how Prince production, it was so ahead of its time. From the second that chandelier resurrected and flew out over the audience, and the Phantom's voice being in surround sound in the Broadway house, and him haunting up in the proscenium. I mean, it had, I think, this immersive impulse, on Andrew and Hal Prince's part that showed me the DNA of what could happen with this incredible show.
And how did it happen? Did you just call up Andrew Lloyd Webber? How does it happen?
How does something like this happen?
Broach that with him?
Well, it was a turning point for this legendary show to close on Broadway, and Andrew wanted to do something with it. And the idea of, maybe a pop-up event was surfaced. And then it became clear, if you're going to do an immersive version of Phantom of the Opera, let's do it. Capital D, let's make it happen. And it so happened that this property on 57th Street, which, if people remember New York back in the day, it was the old Lee's art supply store. And I grew up in New York in the 70s. I went with my mother to that art supply store. That was a time when there was a 4-story art supply store. That doesn't happen anymore. To go and buy my fancy set of colored pencils. So I had been in that building. But it had been vacant and was sort of a swing property, and they weren't sure what was going to happen to it. It was on the docket to be maybe sold. Sotheby's was interested. It was unclear what would happen to it. And Brookfield Properties, as a real estate company, got excited about taking a step into the live entertainment world, and hence the marriage of that building, that site, with this opportunity to reimagine Phantom in an immersive way.
Well, I just described at the outset some of my memory from just having seen the show very recently myself. You were there. What do you want to tell people to prepare people about the experience that you and your team have created for them?
That's a really good question. How do you describe this show? If people know immersive theater, and many audience might know Sleep No More, that started here at the A.R.T., that is kind of a choose your own adventure. That was a choose your own adventure. You could wander in your own time and space across, up here in Brookline, it was 40,000 square feet. In New York, it was 80, 90,000 square feet. And we felt with Phantom, we wanted to deliver the story. We wanted to be kind of on the rails, so to speak, not off the rails. We wanted to, lead an audience and curate your experience. We also knew this is a musical. So the opportunity to feel the music, to have it emanating around you and, 360 experience, and to have live singing was going to be a signature. And live singing, not, from a Broadway stage 50 feet away, but literally 2 feet away from you.
Well, this is the best way I found to describe it after was it was a series of chamber concerts.
Yes.
Because you are this small group and you're moving from room to room. The cast is among you, barely any removed, just sometimes inches away. I was brushed by the Phantom.
Yes.
I was pulled by Christine to go down these stairs. How does that change the story as you crafted it this way to put people more intimately in what is happening in this world?
Yeah, I think it increases the level of experience. You can't detach and distance yourself. You are in it. You're breathing the same air. You're making eye contact. Christine sits down in her dressing room at her piano stool and looks to you, and you're a foot away. And she looks in your eyes and says, "Twisted every way." She confesses her complete soul that is in a crisis. Or the Phantom sings Music of the Night. And I love that you say chamber concert, because I thought, what would it be like if 60 people sat in the darkness with candles and the Phantom sang to you? Not just Christine, but to you, So that experience invites an audience to frankly have what I have all the time as a director.
Right.
When I'm in a rehearsal hall, I'm sitting 2 feet away from everything. And, it's that old thing of like, it's never as good as it is in the rehearsal hall. So for me as a director, it was like, how do I open up that experience to an audience where they feel like they are in it with it? And in our case, we're not doing the whole Phantom of the Opera, right? We very deliberately call it Masquerade. It's a new work inspired by Phantom of the Opera, where the premise is you are invited as an audience member to the Phantom's private masquerade. You are dressed up, as you mentioned. You're dressed in your black, white, silver, formal cocktail attire. You wear a mask, and then you enter his mind. So that was also a lens into the story where you get to experience it from his viewpoint, where you get to see things that you've actually never seen before in the stage show.
And why is that important? Because if you look at the subject matter of the show, of the Phantom of the Opera, not Masquerade, maybe you can raise an eyebrow or two because he is a man who is detaining a woman, and we really don't know what's going on there, but we do learn more about that in Masquerade.
Yeah, I felt so inspired to empower Christine, who's the young ingenue, right? Not to be a victim in this, but rather position her as the most courageous, curious, enlightened young corps de ballet dancer, who has this spiritual soul and is this artistic soulmate to the Phantom. And she's the one who's not afraid to open the mask, or to not open the mask, take the mask off and look at what's behind the mask. So I was telling all the actresses, and there's 6 of them. We can get into that too,
yes.
But there are 6 of them. I would say to all of them, like, play Christine like she's Joan of Arc. She's like the heroine in this story for this man who is disfigured at birth, who has a facial difference, who has been exploited as a freak at a carnival, who is a genius artist, who has never been loved ever in his life. And, she's the one that's able to say, I see you. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I see your genius. I want to know you, but you have to take that mask off, and that's hard for someone who's lived through that kind of trauma.
It's an extraordinary way into him. Let me just pause for a moment. You just talked about the circus freak, and we're led into the circus when we're given an understanding of what he came from. How did you find these acts? There is a man who does things with fire. And again, as you say, you're just inches away from these people. He lit himself on fire. He swallowed fire and then spit it back out. I've never, even for all the theater I've seen,
Yes.
I've never seen anything like it.
Yes.
Where and how did you find this person?
They exist. They are incredible. Downtown circus performers, club performers. It's a whole community of incredible artistry that do acts like the Fire Act. And in the carnival, I thought that was the chance for us to understand, what did the Phantom see when he was the freak sideshow, but, caught in his cage and peering through those bars? What was he seeing? So he saw this fire act. I had this idea if he saw a fire act, because if you know the show, he uses fire. He's like a magician. He throws fire. The famous scene of fire in the stage show. So I thought, how did he learn about fire? Because he was at that circus, at that carnival, watching someone do a fire act, and he got that into his kind of toolkit. Same thing with the magical lasso. That's a big thing in the show, right? He's got this ability with the magical lasso. So we have a circus act that's doing a rope trick. So that was the idea of, what was he against all odds absorbing and taking? Even the cape, right? There's a carnival barker with a black cape. I was like, he saw that cape, and when he escaped and kind of Madame Giry took him to the Paris Opera, he saw a black cape on a costume rack, and he said, you know what? I'm going to take that and make it my own this time. The person who exploited me, I'm going to wear that cape. So it was sort of the origin story of, where did the Phantom as a persona come from?
I'm speaking with Tony-winning director Diane Paulus about Masquerade, which is playing now in New York. What was it like to work with Andrew Lloyd Webber on this? And I'll give my own tiny little perspective. I spent a couple of nights with him in the spring for the Boston Speakers Series, and for a man who did a piece that's decades old now, he still has such affection and enthusiasm for it.
Yeah, he's a remarkable artist. I mean, so many works he's done that impacted me as a young person in the theater. I mean, Jesus Christ Superstar, probably top of the list, Evita. But look at what he was doing. I mean, making a musical about Jesus Christ, about Eva Peron, T.S. Eliot's poem about cats, Starlight Express, people on roller skates. He was I think we tend to think of Andrew Lloyd Webber, we're like, that man who's just like, the formula hit maker. And it's like, actually, no. He was experimenting and pushing the boundaries of musical theater subject-wise and form-wise. So to get to work with him and see his eyes light up when I said, we're going to do something that's never been done before, he was so up for that. And the amount of music that he created for this, right? They're all the hits that you know and love, but you are traveling in time and space through the 6 stories, and music is constantly accompanying you. So he created all these leitmotifs, and I'll never forget, we were late in previews, and I said, I need something more to take us from this room to that room. And he came up this whacked out kind of inversion of one of the themes of the show where you could hear kind of like rats scurrying in the background, and it was like a sound of something dropping on a xylophone. I mean, he was so up for the experiment of it. And also he taught me so much. Obviously, he knows the show so well. So sitting with him and hearing all the stories of how he created it, the being inspired by Paganini, the historical violinist figure, and how that impacted him in the creation of the show. And then we sort of create an homage to Paganini with a live violinist in our show. So there were all these things that he was speaking to me about that were just these gems and jewels that I could grab and say, well, that we're going to put in the show, and that we can take, and let's keep opening the doors to things that maybe you weren't able to do that we could now finally give more airtime to.
Well, as you say, also belying the notion that here is this formulaic hitmaker, he's also having a resurgence right now. Cats is about to go back to Broadway as a drag ball. There's Your Phantom. Sunset Boulevard just had this amazing revival in New York. There are so many of his shows where a next generation of people, of creatives, are coming in and finding that there is deep resonance to today.
Yes. I think, again, it's a tribute to the fact that these shows have that capacity for reinterpretation because they're so theatrical, they're so out of the box, right? It's not like you have to impose something that just feels like it's trying to force something into something it's not. I mean, that's whacked out cats in a spaceship.
I remember
what I mean?
The first time I saw it, it's really all about cats.
It's really all about cats. And I think the genius of, Bill, who's my dear colleague, Bill Rausch, and his reimagination of this as a drag ball is, it's a new idea, but somehow it's meeting the material, right? And I think with Phantom, this idea of the love triangle between the Phantom and Raoul and Christine, and the idea of the masquerade. And we did a lot of research on 19th century masquerade balls and kind of the theatricality of being invited to a party and then seeing these theatrical pageants. kind of into the dark night of the party, that you're taken to places you've never been before. Those are all in Phantom. So I think the resurgence is because it's in the work, and also Andrew, who is the living artist, is open to it. So really, kudos to him for being open to this next generation of exploration with his work.
Well, final question. As you just alluded, this is a giant jigsaw puzzle, which I didn't realize was happening until, as we end, we're in this great space where you can get a drink after the show. You can process everything.
Yes.
People are taking pictures everywhere. And then the room began to fill up. And I thought, well, there weren't this many people who were traveling with me from room to room. And that's when it dawned on me that there were multiple shows happening at the same time. How on earth do you do this without anybody having a sense of what's happening and to have cast members doing what? How does it all unfold?
I know. It actually broke my brain, to be honest. It was so complicated. This was the hardest thing I've ever done. So challenging, but also the most thrilling. I mean, basically, there's 6 shows a night. So pulses of 60 people are going through the experience, one after the other, And we have the whole thing kind of like a Swiss watch on a timer, so that everything is timed to the second. And it took, weeks and weeks of previews and beta tests and charts and a couple of amazing young math majors that I nabbed. I was like, I'm not good with charts. You're going to have to do this for me, so that everything is timed and moving through the space. So you're never aware, that this is going on in the whole building. But, we had to invent the technology for it. We have technology that is live mixing all the mics across 6 floors.
So you're talking about 6 Phantoms, for instance.
Yes, 6 Phantoms, 6 Christines, 3 Madame Giris, 3 Raouls, and then there's some blessed, incredible performers that do all 6 shows in one night.
1 Fire Eater?
1 Fire Eater, yes.
Wow. That's a show, that's a revelation in and of itself when I finally realized what was happening. Yeah,
yes,
well, congratulations. Yes. It would have melted my brain. It wouldn't have broken my brain. It would have melted it. You could ask the team every day they want to time out the show with me. I can never figure out the timing.
Yes, exactly.
You do the math. Diane Paulus, always great to see you. Congratulations on the show. It was so much fun.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for coming.
Diane Paulus is a Tony Award-winning director and the artistic director of the American Repertory Theater. She's the director of Masquerade, the immersive adaptation of Andrew Lloyd Webber's The Phantom of the Opera. It's playing on West 57th Street. To learn more, go to masqueradenyc.com.
Should stay, I would only be in your way, so I'll go, but I know.
Well, before we continue the show now, some incredibly sad news to share. Legendary musician Dolly Parton has died at age 80. From humble beginnings in her Tennessee mountain home to the heights of stardom spun from her extraordinary songwriting, there was nary a person alive who didn't enjoy some part of her career and person, including the More is More performance and personality that made her a beloved figure from country music audiences to Dollywood denizens to film patrons. The news was announced via video posted on social media by her nephew Brian Seaver, who did not cite a cause of death. We will have so much more to discuss about the life, career, contributions, and philanthropy of Dolly Parton on The Culture Show tomorrow and later on Friday in our Week in Review. Once again, Dolly Parton has died at age 80. Coming up, Chef Ana Sortun on the bold flavors of the Mediterranean table and how they can nourish the body, spirit, and soul. She's next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's art and culture programming.
If it matters in Massachusetts, it's on In Common.
This weekend in Northampton, a little bit off the beaten path, on the outskirts of Salem, from across Massachusetts and around New England.
With reporting from 3 newsrooms across the Commonwealth, you'll get a statewide perspective you won't find anywhere else. What's happening, why it matters, and how it connects us, from the Berkshires to the Bay. Listen to In Common, Saturdays at 2 on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Brighton Farmers Market, Wednesday afternoons from 1:30 to 6:30 on Brighton Common in Boston, June through October, featuring a variety of local foods, farm-fresh produce, children's activities, and live music. And Cornerstone at Canton, an assisted living community with wellness, care, and support services designed to help seniors age in place, including a Compass Memory Support Neighborhood. CornerstoneCanton.com.
And Liberty Mutual Insurance. Liberty believes progress happens when people feel secure and exists to help people embrace today and pursue tomorrow. Learn more at libertymutual.com.
This summer, you can clear out the clutter when you donate your used car, truck, or boat to GBH. It's easy to do, and it supports the journalism you trust. Learn more at gbh.org/vehicle donation.
I'm Jared Bowen, live on 89.7 and streaming on the GBH News YouTube channel. This is The Culture Show. I also want to mention, as we continue to think about the death of Dolly Parton at age 80, you can find an interview I did with her a few years ago on the PBS website. It'll be posted there. Well, if you eat in Boston today, flavors like sumac, Aleppo pepper, and pomegranate molasses no longer seem especially exotic. Ana Sortun had much to do with that. For more than 2 decades, the James Beard Award-winning chef behind restaurants Oleana, Sofra, and Sarma has made the cooking of the Eastern Mediterranean and Turkey part of Boston's flavor profile. It wasn't the food Sortun trained to cook. She studied classical French cuisine in Paris and came to Boston bearing that tradition. But a life-changing trip to Turkey introduced her to another way of thinking about a meal. Tables filled with small plates, vegetables given starring roles, and spices creating depth. She brought those ideas back to Cambridge and opened Oleana in 2001. Sofra and Sarma followed, along with 2 cookbooks and a James Beard Award. Today, that first encounter has grown into a career-long exploration of what Mediterranean food can be, how it tastes, how it makes us feel, and why the way we eat matters. Ana Sortun joins us now to talk about it all. Welcome to The Culture Show. It's really great to have you here.
Thank you, Jared. It's really nice to be here. I appreciate it.
Well, we had a conversation not too long ago. I was so fortunate to have brunch with you and some others, and the way you talked about Turkey and the Mediterranean and food was just so eye-opening to me. So to start, how would you describe your life before that discovery and life after?
Well, I trained when I was really young. I went to school in France, to a small cooking school called La Varenne, and that was essential for learning about respect for ingredients and technique and all that. But we all know we all love French food, by the way. There's nothing wrong with French food. It's amazing. But they achieve flavor by adding, butter, basically salt, fat, acid, heat are the essential ingredients for making something taste good. And when you're cooking something, you always want, that's your main objective, is for it to taste good. But people don't often think about how people are going to feel after they eat. And that was, for me, what the big sort of take home or revelation I had when I visited Turkey for the first time, is how I felt after eating. And also just how exciting and rich these flavors were.
And did you just see it in play? Was it the way people talked about food, the way they gathered around food? How did you begin to have this deeper understanding of food culture there?
Well, one of the things that I noticed sort of off the bat was people would sit down to these pretty large spreads of what you call meze, right? They're these small plates that everyone shares either at the beginning of a meal before they have meat or fish, or they just make a meal out of the meze. And they're mostly vegetable-driven dishes, so they're lighter. And the idea is that you sort of fill up on these really rich flavors and vegetable-based lighter dishes, so that if you do go into some sort of meat or fish course, you end up sort of eating less and so, for all the rules that say you need, 7 portions of vegetables a day, that's pretty hard to get in a standard American diet or even a European diet. But in Turkey, it's a way of life. So what happens after you eat is this, the table's covered in all these meze, and you have this big feast over a couple of hours, and then you still feel great, right? The food isn't heavy. The flavors are rich, but the food isn't heavy. So typically people will get up and dance afterwards. The chairs will be removed, and there's the idea is that you still feel light enough after having a meal. And so they cook that way. They believe that, when they're eating. And obviously things like kebabs are heavier, and people do go out for those sort of kebab nights, but then everyday eating is really filled with vegetable rich dishes, and the use of spice is really what sets that food apart from the rest of the Mediterranean.
Well, I'm struck by how you're the exceptional traveler, because I think so many of us go to a place and we think, well, I want to bring this part of the culture home. I want to still live with this, but we know we go back to our American habits. You didn't do that at all.
Right. I think I was so intrigued by this concept of feeling really good after eating, and also being able to taste many things is such a pleasure. And sometimes when things are so rich, you can't taste other things afterwards, right? So because you fill up too quickly, or you start to feel heavy, whether you're feeling full or heavy. And so that it sort of became this aha moment for me, like a study. Like, I need to learn more about why have I never understood this? So I would keep going back to Turkey. So for me, it's a continuing education, but it has become sort of a life purpose, in that I was so inspired by it that I continually want to share that with others and sort of expand people's perception of what Mediterranean food is and can be.
You've had your restaurant, at least some of your restaurants, over for decades now. In those early days, how was it to create them and build around this philosophy and build around the food, which may not have even been readily available, the spices, etc., readily available then?
Yeah, and not to mention we opened in 2001, so anything that had anything to do with the Middle East was a terrible marketing tool, right? So we had to sort of, but thankfully that didn't last long, and people were really interested in the different flavors, and then the questions sort of started. So our mission was really to educate and encourage people. Often, we had tricks at some of the, like Sofra, which was a quick service place, where we would place like something familiar next to something unfamiliar. So in other words, we'd have like a chocolate earthquake cookie next to a baklava or something, and people would get the chocolate cookie and think, oh, that was so good, the other thing must be good too. So they would start sort of branching out as they came more often, and that was sort of a way of educating people as well, sort of gaining trust that these other desserts were also really delicious and worthy of trying as well. So depending on what it was, we had certain methods of drawing people in or helping them learn about the flavors. And it's continued for me. I spend once or twice a year I take groups to Turkey with an organization called Old Ways. So it's really become something that is like a life purpose almost. I not only further education, but a real purpose. I love it.
I'm speaking with Ana Sortun, the James Beard Award-winning chef behind Oleana, Sofra Bakery and Cafe, and Sarma. How would you describe all of your cooking background then coming together, growing up here in America, having this French training, and then having this epiphany in the Middle East?
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense, especially I come from Seattle, Washington, from a Norwegian family on both sides, and I couldn't be any farther from, my roots couldn't be any farther from Turkey, right? So and they're not exactly known for their food, and well, they are in cities like Copenhagen, but in the Norwegian cuisine is very simple compared to this, right? So for me, it was something that I fell in love with, and something that I really was committed to learn about. But it was sort of a philosophy, and also again, just a novelty in a way. It was more complicated to cook this way than it was to just add more butter. It was more nuanced, and I really do consider spices like paint or something. It just adds so much more beauty and complexity to things when you understand how to use them. And that was really what inspired me to go more east, was the use of spice and just some of these other ingredients like pomegranate molasses that add lots of acidity and depth as well. It doesn't, from Seattle to France it was very serendipitous, and it was really, I'm sort of an opportunist, and it was a woman that introduced herself to me and invited me to go to Turkey 30 years ago, or more than 30 years ago, to sort of study with her. And that's really, it was a combination of mentorship and opportunity, and curiosity.
To what extent does the French cooking or even the butter still work its way into your food, or is that in the past largely?
Well, my family was always like, why do you have to go to France to go to cooking school? What could you learn there that you couldn't learn here in the United States? And I never was able to answer that question for the longest time. But what I was really taught there was one of the most foundational things, in that ingredients really matter. Like, if strawberries are not in season, make something else. And that was really what I took from my school in France, besides, learning very important knife skills and sauce techniques. And what's so cool about Turkey is that it's literally where East meets West. So you do see European techniques combined with Eastern flavors. And a lot of that has to do with the Ottoman Empire, too, and the fancy food that came out of the palaces. So there's regional food in Turkey, but then there's also the palace cuisine, which is so fascinating. It makes Napoleon and his whole crew look incredibly lazy when you look at what came out of these kitchens at Topkapi and the Ottoman palaces. They're crazy. So that was also a really cool thing to see the two combined for me. It was true fusion, where the continents meet and the techniques meet too.
Well, how would you describe, for people who have maybe a passing familiarity with spices, what the role of spice is in Turkey as you've observed it, and really how fundamental it is to your own cooking?
Spices they play such an interesting role. They have a few roles. Most importantly, they create richness and depth without making something heavy. But you think about Italian food, where if you're having a bowl of risotto that's very plain, maybe it's got lots of umami because it's got Parmesan cheese or truffles on it, but it's not quite balanced with anything else. But you're drinking the spices in your glass of Barolo or Barbera or whatever you're drinking, right? So the wine pairing in European countries is the spice, right? So that kind of richness, that kind of roundness, the balance that they give, but then they also create cravings. Like when you say, I feel like Mexican food tonight, you're craving some sort of spice profile that's known in Mexican cooking. And actually Turkish and Mexican are so similar, and which is why I really love both of them so much. And then they also provide authenticity, like what makes something taste like where it comes from. So what makes something taste Greek? What makes something taste Moroccan? And it's usually some spice combination that they're known for too. So it's just slight, it's using very similar spices but in different ways. And in Turkey and the Mediterranean, they use spices in sort of a medium way, whereas in India they'll use it in a heavier way, and in other countries, they'll use more heat and more chilies combined with spices. So it has its own authentic flavors and combinations.
As you mentioned, you're still traveling every year, if not twice a year. What are some of the most interesting or revelatory things you've learned in the last few visits, even though you've been doing this for decades now?
What's so interesting about Turkey, and it doesn't happen to me other places, and it's not because the cuisine isn't as amazing, it's just what I'm finding and how curious I am when I'm in Turkey. But every single time I'm there, I see something I've never seen. I learn something new about a different way of doing something. I was just in the Aegean in the spring. That was the last time I was there, and in May, and onions and artichokes were coming out like crazy, and I'll forever keep this technique. But they were making essentially soubise, which is a French onion sauce with fresh onions that hadn't turned to starch yet. They were so fresh that they were pure sugar, and they would cook the onions down for a long time until they were very velvety, puree it, and then bake fish in it. And it's one of the most simplest, magical things ever, but you have to do it right during onion season, which we just passed. But it was like, this is a traditional Aegean Turkish way of preparing fish that I had never seen before. And it's also French, which is also very interesting. So there's a lot of cultural crossover, especially on the West Coast, and a lot of Greek influence as well, as you can imagine.
I just finally want to ask, we'll continue this conversation in the life of the show, I hope, but this is summertime. It's abundance, especially with vegetables and fruits. I know your husband has Sienna Farms. Is this your favorite time of year to cook, or do you appreciate the years where we don't have the total abundance and there are a little bit more challenging times?
Both, but I think I really, it's sort of like the grass is always greener situation. Like I'm almost tired of tomatoes, which sounds crazy.
What?
I know, right? Because we miss them so much when they're gone. But right now it's just making as much sauce as I possibly can. Right now, because in January there's nothing better than pulling out an August tomato sauce. It's just incredible. But I have learned probably more about food from being married to my husband than I have in all the years handling it, just because nature's amazing and it gives us really cool things. And I think I've grown to appreciate food and how much it takes to get it to us. And yeah, so this season I'm always really grateful, and I'm grateful to the people that work on the farm, that work in the heat and harvest all the stuff, and because it truly is the fresh ingredients makes cooking so much easier.
Well, your food is extraordinary. Thank you for sharing all of this. And as I say, hopefully we'll have this conversation will continue many times here on the show. Great to see you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Jared. I appreciate it.
Ana Sortun is the James Beard Award-winning chef behind restaurants Oleana, Sofra Bakery and Cafe in Sarma. She's also the author of 2 cookbooks, which are must-reads. Again, thank you. Coming up, Flower Power, the author of a new Rizzoli book examining how flowers shape our world, joins me. That's next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
Angola's peatlands are 4 times bigger than previously thought. Those wetlands serve as powerful carbon sinks, and conservationists are keen to protect them.
We don't want these peatlands to suffer the same sort of consequences as other countries have done.
That means keeping them from being dried up or filled in. Hear that story next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And MIT Sloan Executive Education, fueled by cutting-edge research and aided by the latest technology, professionals can choose from more than 90 in-person and online courses offered throughout the year. Executive.mit.edu.
Support for GBH comes from you. and the Newport Mansions.
11 historic properties and landscapes, 7 of which are designated National Historic Landmarks.
Kevin O'Leary, Director of Marketing.
We share the same values. We're curious, we're interested in the arts, in history, current events, and our GBH sponsorship messages to those people who may be thinking about visiting. We're in their backyard, we're supporting them, and we're inviting them down to Newport to support us.
To learn more, visit gbh.org/sponsorship.
The GBH News app is your daily home for essential local news. The stories you actually need to know without distractions, noise, or paywalls. Download the GBH News app today on the App Store or Google Play.
I'm Jared Bowen. This is The Culture Show live on 89.7 and streaming on the GBH News YouTube channel. Henry David Thoreau once wrote, "Flowers were made to be seen, not overlooked." Christin Geall takes up that challenge by asking what comes into view when we really pay attention to them. In her new book, Flora Culture, How Flowers Shape Our World, she traces the enormous human systems that have grown up around flowers, how they move through global markets, carry religious, political, and cultural meaning. They tell us about labor, fashion, and ecology, even about who gets to decide what counts as beautiful in the first place. Moving across more than 40 countries, Geall follows flowers from the fields where they're grown to the global markets that sell them. Geall is a writer, designer, photographer, and gardener, of course, whose previous book cultivated the elements of floral style, explored floral design through art, history, and ecology. Tomorrow, she'll be on Martha's Vineyard for an event at Edgartown Books. Welcome to The Culture Show. Congratulations on your book.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Well, first of all, I learn something every day, of course, from doing this show, including there's a term for how you organize this book and present information. What did you do here?
It is an abecedarium, so an A to Z. It's a fancy word for an A to Z. 85 essays arranged alphabetically. Some letters were harder to fulfill than others, naturally, and some letters have more than one entry. So I go from aesthetics, I believe is the first one, to zeitgeist.
And how was it to write in this regard, to build a book based on ideas and observations categorized in this way?
It allowed me to treat the book itself almost like a collage, because there are 250 images, and then the ideas also overlap as well. So the reader's able to come into the book in any place and flip to the next entry. Some of those ideas might connect, or you could flip to the glossary at the end. Actually, there is a glossary because I couldn't stop at just the 85 words. Kept going.
Well, tell me about your interest in, obviously, you love flowers and gardening and all things horticulture, but what it meant to do a deep dive into everything from phobias people have around color to the refrigeration that's required in the global market that is flower and exchange today.
The cold chain, yes. I left off the last book probably in about the 1800s. And this book really focused on a lot of changes that happened in the 19th century and then moving forward into the future, right up into the period of globalization and kind of neoliberal reforms in the economy that put us in the place we're in with flowers today, and how they travel around the world. Airplanes are filled with them, zipping around. How we treat them as an industrial crop and almost as a disposable product.
Well, the shipping that you document here is extraordinary. How do you describe the volume of what's transported on a daily basis? How many planes, how many flowers are shipped around?
Oh, millions. I think Miami receives about 22 million a day. To give you an example of how long and insane some of these cold chains can be, Ecuador is the leading supplier to Russia for flowers. Kenya supplies 40% of Europe's flowers. And I think Schiphol Airport in the Netherlands is reaching 60 countries a day just with horticultural products. So when I speak about flowers in the book, it's not just the cut flower industry, it's also horticulture. And I think gardeners have been let off easy in the past because they have their hands in the earth. But some of the products we see at the garden center aren't actually very sustainable at all. They're most likely grown in peat, served up in plastic, corporately controlled, sterile, your basket fillers, your bedding plants, this kind of aesthetic history that has been around for really, since the 19th century, but not before that. So flowers have been really commodified.
And how do we begin to get around that? You talk about proven winners. I mean, that's a brand. I don't mean to call them out, but I do mean to call them out because it's the one that everybody seems to know, which means everybody's probably planting similar things. And understanding that what we're doing is maybe not the most sensitive as we think about our climate and our world today.
We could grow from seed. That's one sort of hack to be a better gardener. And don't expect instant color. The idea of an instant garden is an unrealistic expectation. And then also ask, how long will this plant stay in the ground? Am I just putting it out temporarily? And that makes a difference in terms of carbon capture and soil and in so many other ecological terms. So plant a forest, maybe not a bed, would be one notion, a quick takeaway, for example.
You disrupt us with bulbs, too, speaking of planting.
Yes, that was a bit of an expose. In terms of sustainable flowers, tulip bulbs, for example, these days they don't perennialize easily. Hard to get them to come back, no matter what the situation is, whether you've got great drainage or so on. And that's somewhat intentional. The bulb growers, it might take them 2 or 3 years to produce a saleable bulb. Then they would be planted briefly in the ground, and it makes more economic sense to pull the whole plant, bulb and all, for a flower farmer. And those are marketed as local sustainable flowers. I have to question that.
I'm speaking with Christin Geall, who's talking about her new book, Flora Culture, How Flowers Shape Our World. By the way, if you're on the Vineyard tomorrow, she'll be there for an event at Edgartown Books. You also describe this as a manifesto, this book.
Well, Rizzoli did not go for that title.
It's hard to frequently, as I was going through this, I thought, wow, I really am looking at a Rizzoli book right now.
Yeah, that was the interesting part of working with them. Actually, at one point, when I submitted part of the manuscript, one of the critiques was, this looks like National Geographic. And I wondered, well, what's the problem here? Right. Well, there were too many people in the book because I have faces of growers and designers the world over. And the argument with people in plant books is that they will date the book through their clothing, what they look like, these kind of garden books and lovely lifestyle coffee table books. Not that many people appear. And then I got to thinking about the fact that there are cultivars, certain types of plants that run in trends in gardens as well. And I, as a lifelong gardener, can certainly spot fashion and style over periods in garden design and garden books. So I did have to sub out some people and put some more lovely floral arrangements in and some more close-ups of flowers. But I think we have to think about flowers and fashion all the time.
Well, what would you describe as where we are right now in terms of trends with flowers and floral design?
Certainly moving towards, native plants. And as the climate changes, everyone's reckoning with where are we going to stand on native plants when there may be other plants that can suit the climate that actually aren't native to the region. Certainly cities are facing this in terms of their tree cover when the native trees will become too drought stressed. Certainly Europe's going through this right at the moment, England in particular. And they're looking to more European plants, other plants that are going to survive for the next 100 years and trying to plant for the future in that way.
Well, I want to go through some of the things I just thought were so fascinating. As you say, it's this compendium of ideas, but queer plants and avocado flowers in particular. Tell us about how we can see so much of what is so divisive or controversial in human life, but plays out in plant species all the time.
Yeah. flowers can assume many, many forms. They could be, they have femme parts or masc parts. Some flowers can change in the space of the day, how they present. And it was fascinating to learn about the queer ecology in terms of mutuality and mutualism and change and the dynamism of nature, and how humans change expressions as well. A flower can change expression or not. There's a multiplicity of life forms, and the area of queer ecology really implies that let's accept that everything here is on a spectrum of some kind, and we can learn from this, and that we can support one another within that, because there are reasons in nature. And queer ecology is also looking at, debunking some of the heteronormative discussions in science in terms of in actual botany about how plants have been described historically, and looking to kind of almost decolonize that thinking.
Speaking of that, what about the Latin names that so many people wear with pride, that they only know the Latin names of plants and flowers, not the common names? You have thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, that's another decolonization effort that, there's a Canadian Métis scientist, Max Lebrun, who says that this idea of universalism is a trick of Western imperialism, when all of these indigenous language and indigenous plant names had been devalued, stripped, taken away from the record. It did allow us to categorize plants in one way, certainly, and I was trained in botanical Latin, but in somewhere like Micronesia, a plant can change names from one side of an atoll to the other. So this is local plant names, and indigenous plant names often reveal a lot about place-based understanding, and that's a tremendous loss to us all if that kind of knowledge that's embedded in names are gone. And instead, what the Western tradition is that the botanist who, quote, discovered the plant, or who hired the indigenous guide who then got him the plant and pressed it and returned it to somewhere like Kew Gardens for cataloging, they would put their own name on the plant. So the species name would often be, or either one.
Where did your own, as you said that you've had training, but where fundamentally did your own interest, where was it sparked? Where was it planted in horticulture and flowers?
Oh, I first interned on Martha's Vineyard when I was very young with an herbalist. And she was a wonderful storyteller, and that led me to do a degree in environmental studies and anthropology, kind of ethnobotany. And then actually years ago, I interned at Beacon Press here in Boston in graduate school when I was studying creative writing. So I've always had the passion, and I did intern over at Kew Gardens in England as well. So it's been with me for a long time, and the stories are countless when it comes to plants and flowers.
Including orchids used as packing material at one point, at least for England. These are these exalted plants today, but to understand the history of them, which you write about here.
Well, that was a part of the massive collection. The Victorians, they've gone through so many different periods of fetishizing certain plants, ferns, orchids, for example. As the Industrial Revolution provided places in which people could grow more tender plants, of course, the race was on to accumulate more of them, and orchids in particular. Some were used as packing material, but right up till I have a picture in the book that I found. I believe it was a Harvard archive of the largest shipment of orchids that reached San Francisco, and it was over, I think, 300, I can't remember the number of plants, but a shocking number of plants. And of course, trees were felled to collect these plants. And they went to plant collectors, wealthy collectors around the world, because for a long time, people didn't actually know how orchids reproduced. It wasn't until the microscope and the understanding of mycelium and the roles that fungus plays in orchid culture and germination. So it's really interesting.
As you say, the trivia and the history is
the trivia
is endless here. The chromophobia, which I also was not aware of. This is a fear of color. How do you write about this in relation to plants and gardens, which are riots of color?
Yeah, actually yesterday I was giving a talk on the vineyard to the Garden Club and the Vineyard Preservation Society, and this came up in terms of Frederick Law Olmsted behind Central Park, when there was this fad for bedding plants, and certainly the Boston Public Garden still goes in for a bit of this look today of the really colorful beds of tropical plants. There was an argument that he made that this style of planting was childish and vulgar. And there was an association that bright colors were for, quote, savage nations at one time, and for children, and that the more sophisticated palate would choose other things that weren't so, quote, garish. And I make the argument in the book that to use garish is gauche. I mean, it is... color is subjective, cultural. It is something means something so different to every person. And flowers, the same follows for flowers. A lot of these ideas do come from an English artist called David Batchelor, who did write a book on chromophobia. And some people do have real fears of colors, real phobias. And I learned that people can acclimatize themselves, and they're doing video simulation now where people will walk into a room, gradually move into inhabiting more and more of that color through virtual reality to help them recover from chromophobia. I had no idea. And they're named by color.
Well, this is, as I say, I learned so much from your book. And we didn't even get into the art history and how that fueled. We have 30 seconds. Can you tell me, 30 seconds, how much art has had to do with our just appreciation of plants and their place?
Oh, I stopped at the Harvard Museums of Art today and was looking at the still lifes. And there's so much there. There's so much there, even looking at what plants the artists had access to in different periods, or what plants were new, like when nasturtiums showed up, and how interesting that is. And that's all through art history and painting. It's so wonderful. Flowers are wonderful.
Well, I was at the Gardner Museum this morning looking at the same thing because you've made me look at them differently. Well, Christin Geall, thank you so much for being with us. And again, congratulations on the book. It's fabulous.
Thank you so much.
Christin Geall is the author of Flora Culture, How Flowers Shape Our World. And again, tomorrow she'll be on Martha's Vineyard for an event at Edgartown Books. Thank you for listening to another edition of The Culture Show. You can tune in or join us live at the Boston Public Library. Again, we will be looking at the life and legacy of Dolly Parton, who has died today at age 80. And you'll find a link to my 2019 conversation with the one and only Dolly Parton. She was so extraordinary that day. It's been posted to our Instagram page at The Culture Show GBH, or you can find it on my own at The Jared Bowen. If you ever miss us here live on the radio, check out the Culture Show podcast. I'm Jared Bowen. Have a great day.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's art and culture programming.